So the point guard position is actually the one right now of people actually on contract that is completely full.
Hmm.
We have Trey Jones, Blake Wesley. We just mentioned maybe he ends up getting moved to the 2. We'll see what happens. But as of right now, Blake Wesley, Devontae Graham. So those are your 3 that are on full contract. But then you've also got Jamari Bouye on a 2-way. So that is 4 guys at the point guard position.
Yeah. Um, I like it, but I also don't. And that's why we kind of want to draft somebody at 4 or 8 to kind of help fix that problem. Uh, Booyah, obviously a two-way player. Devontae Graham, a veteran, likely not going to play that much next year, but an important third stringer for sure. Blake Wesley has some upside. Trey Jones, I think, is a extremely talented backup point guard at his best. So I think we're missing that explosive piece, which is what we're trying to find in the draft.
I think the thing that stands out to me here, Ethan, is, and I know, you can't predict Spurs trades, but I think Devontae Graham is a name to watch. He's
Right.
going on his expiring contract, and say we're in a situation where we do like Blake Wesley at the 1. And even if he doesn't play this year, we want him to compete for that spot. If that's the case, Devontae Graham could be a name that gets moved, in like a Josh Richardson type trade, in the trade that we got him for. But just because now he's going into an expiring contract, even though it is $12 million, that's a name to watch that we could move for picks. But also, I think that's a buyout candidate as well. We could just buy him out to open up space there if we do want Blake Wesley to play the 1. But that's also why I brought up the conversation a little bit earlier that if Malachi's struggling, you might just roll with whoever you drafted, and you might feel like Blake's going to be the 2 moving forward anyway.
Right. I think that part all kind of stands on the fact that if he improves his 3-point shot, like Blake Wesley has to improve his 3-point shot before we can comfortably move him to the 2 guard permanently.
The one thing I will say about that, though, is like how different. I mean, I'm sure Malachi's percentage is a little bit better from what we just read, but
Hmm.
how different is Blake Wesley and Malachi Branham's 3-point shooting?
Big time difference.
You think so?
It's like 14, 15%.
Okay. Okay. I'm just a little bit more down on Malachi coming out of the season, I think, in my head then. You're bringing me back to reality here,
I
Ethan.
think
But
he's like 34, 35%, if I'm not
yeah.
mistaken.
And with all the comments we get about Malachi too, that probably delves into my psyche a little bit,
For
and it
sure.
makes me think he's worse than he is. But see, yeah, if he's even at like 34% really for a second year player, like that's not that crazy. As much as this was offensively, a little bit of a disappointing season for Malachi, but obviously adding Victor Wembanyama has a ton to do with that.
Mm.
But I think the bigger point here, Ethan, is now we move on to the 2 position, is with potentially drafting someone at the 1, going back to that Blake Wesley conversation for the last time, they could just decide we're going to pick a point guard, and then Blake and Malachi are going to battle it out for the backup 2 spot. And maybe even, throughout the season, they could be interchanged depending on who's playing better.
Right. I don't have a problem with that at all. I mean, that's kind of what they did to Malachi early in the year. It just so happened that we didn't have a rookie point guard to play next to Blake Wesley. We had Devontae Graham, so
Mm-hmm.
they weren't going to do that. They played those 2 together, and it kind of worked. Like Malachi definitely improved after that, as well as Blake Wesley. But then Malachi took another dive, which is what I think that tastes in your mouth is like he went up and then he went right kind of back down. So
Yeah, it's like my thoughts are at the end of the season, Ethan. The same
yeah.
thing with the Blake 3-point shooting. I gotta think of it in totality. But
Hmm.
more importantly, Devin Vassell and Malachi Branham are the 2 shooting guards on the roster as of right now. What are your thoughts on both of them, and then also the open roster spot at the 2?
It's a big year for both of them. I think Devin Vassell played great last year. I think he was by far and away the best duo partner for Victor Wembanyama. Other than Trey Jones, I think he kind of developed a chemistry the fastest with Victor Wembanyama, especially in the pick and roll. We know what he's able to do as a scorer. I think he needs to get to 20 plus next year, points per game. I mean, on efficient scoring. He needs to just be absolutely, unquestionably the Robin to Victor Wembanyama's Batman. That's my goal for him. Malachi Branham, if he pulls everything together, I think he's a more than capable backup shooting guard. I think he's still got a lot of room to grow. It's also only his second season last year. But for him, if he's at his best, he's a guy that can get you 15 a game on efficient shooting coming off the bench and just be just a flamethrower where we really don't lose that much offense when Devin is resting.
Yeah, the only thing for Malachi is, and if we were to read a Malachi article, I think they're probably. I mean, with the way that his offensive game kind of tailed off a little bit at the end of the season, consistency there, getting back into
Yes.
rhythm with those pull up jumpers, and making the catch and shoot ones as well. Just kind of like I said, getting back into rhythm there is the focus.
Hmm.
But the bigger thing for Malachi is defense. That's
Yes.
the only thing this offseason that it's like. I mean, I say only thing, but that should be the main focus for Malachi this offseason, and I'm sure it is.
Yeah, you'd hope the offense is just a rhythm thing and a confidence thing, but you're right. Defense has been bad since day one. He needs to improve.
And it's kind of funny because Blake Wesley and Malachi Branham are kind of inverted in that sense.
Kinda, yeah. They both need to improve on the opposite thing.
So yeah, that's why, especially them battling it out, like I really I'm starting to see that more. But whenever you talk about Devin Vassell, I'm reminded of one more thing from that Jonathan Givony
Mm.
interview on The Ringer, Ethan. He said the two players that the Spurs consider untouchable are Victor Wembanyama and Devin Vassell. And I was surprised to hear, well, I mean, I from our perspective as people who are super locked into the Spurs, we really feel like Jeremy Sohan has an argument to be in that conversation. But if we're just being completely realistic with Victor Wembanyama, and with all of also the other smoke coming out about how if the Spurs really do want to accelerate the timeline, Jeremy Sohan is somebody who, if we are going to make a big trade, may have to be included. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I
I'm
hope
not. I'm
not.
not saying for sure. Yeah, like I hope not to.
I would throw him in there if I was the GM as well as untouchable, but I understand why they didn't. But Devin Vassell, absolutely, without question, untouchable.
Yeah. And I don't want to consider that for Jeremy either, but if the Spurs are in the market for like going after somebody like a Donovan Mitchell, just for the total sake of conversation, like they really want
Hmm.
to do get that other star, you're going to have to give up one of your high potential guys, and probably the highest. Like if I'm another team, and I don't mean this in any bad way, but if I'm another GM for another team and I'm trading one of my stars to the Spurs, Jeremy Sohan's like a non-negotiable.
I was watching TSR, who was I'm sorry, I don't know the guy's name. He was doing an Atlanta
I
Hawks.
watched this too.
You did,
Yeah.
and he was like, "I'm not taking any call for Dejounte or Trey where y'all are not offering me Devin Vassell." And I was like, "Well, I guess we're just not gonna get Trey Young or Dejounte Murray because that's not gonna happen." But he was like, "If y'all are offering me Malachi Branham, Keldon Johnson, and Zach Collins," he's like, "I'm hanging up the phone." And I was like, yeah." I was like, "I
I mean,
understand.
fair.
Yeah, fair point, but that's all we're gonna offer."
Right. And so, but the bigger point is Gavoni mentioned that, and that was the first time that I'd heard like a national guy like that mention a name other than Victor in the untouchable conversation. And when you talk about Devin really establishing himself this year, this is his first year with big contract money,
Right.
so they're going to expect that from him. And our boy Rob Trejo Jr., he also has talked about this, and he's like, with the Spurs culture and him having that contract money, it's not just Devin Vassell who's going to be expecting that from himself, but the Spurs will be demanding and expecting that. It's going to be a different tone than
Mhm.
when you're making 5 million to like 28.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So yeah, I'm really excited for Devin Vassell. We just got to figure out what happens with the backup two position. And I'll just throw this in there just for the sake of throwing it in there. There could be a chance that our guy David Duke Jr. may end up potentially getting that third string spot.
There is a possibility. And he played really well the last couple of games for the Spurs, I thought.
And played really well in the G League as well for the Austin Spurs. I don't know for sure if that's going to be a thing, but if we don't try to like upgrade the backup position and we roll in with like a Blake Wesley, Malachi Branham type deal where we're not necessarily maybe like where we're not like full at the guard position, whether that's the one or the two. David Duke Jr. I think is a name to watch for the third string two position.
For sure.